What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today will be part 2 of our 3-part series discussing the farm systems in Major League Baseball. This was a video suggestion from one of our viewers. So I wanted to wait for the trade deadline to go through because there are some players who were traded in this prospect pool. But without further ado, we will kind of jump in. Part 1 was yesterday. That was discussing the AL and the NL Easts. While part 2 is today, AL and NL Centrals. And part 3 will be tomorrow, discussing the AL and the NL West. As I did yesterday, I will be pointing out any player who's a top 100 prospect according to baseball. In yesterday's video, we did discuss what it means by prospect, how a player is eligible to be a prospect or a rookie. And of course, these rankings are from the MLB website. They do a nice prospect ranking there. So of course, I didn't come up with these myself. Shout out to MLB.com for handing out these rankings. But without further ado, we will jump in. And of course, it's color-coded, like always, just so it's a little cleaner and easier on the eyes. We will start off with the Chicago White Sox in the top left-hand corner there in black. So they definitely have a strong farm system. They have four top 100 prospects, but a lot of these guys are going to graduate very soon from the prospect ranking. And they still have a strong farm system even without them. But their number one prospect is outfielder Luis Robert. He's actually the number 3 prospect in all of baseball. Their number 2 is the number 17 in all of baseball in first baseman Andrew Vaughn. Their number 3 prospect is the 22nd in baseball in right-handed pitcher Michael Kopech, who was acquired from Boston in the Chris Sale trade a few seasons ago at this point. And their number 4 is the 43rd prospect in baseball, second baseman Nick Madrigal. And then they get a bunch of pitchers and left-hander Garrett Crockett, 4 right-handers in Jared Kelly, Jonathan Stever, Dane Dunning, and Matthew Thompson, and then an outfielder in Micker Adolfo. So, like I said, a lot of these guys on the top, it's definitely a very strong farm system, but Robert, he's probably graduating after this year. He's been in the league for the whole season, so he should definitely be graduated. Vaughn, I believe they just called him up, or they're definitely talking about it. He's probably going to remain in the farm system, though. Kopech opted out of the 2020 season, but he's also been a little iffy. He did have I believe it was Tommy John that he missed the whole season with last year, so they need him to come back. He hasn't been the same pitcher that he was, and a lot of this is on his potential, but if his potential is getting hurt, he's going to fall in the rankings. And then Madrigal, I can go through. I developed a baseball crush on Shane Bieber of the Cleveland team, as you know. And Madrigal is probably my offensive version of Shane Bieber. I'm a big fan of him. He's a great guy. I don't want to just go on a discussion about him, but and then again, all these pitchers, it's always good to have arms in your top 10 because arms, even if you're struggling, you can trade arms for pretty much a premium of bats because teams seem to always be able to develop bats but not arms. We'll get to Cleveland, and they have a weaker farm system. They probably have the weakest farm system. They definitely have the weakest farm system in the AL Central, which doesn't bode well for the team. But, this is including the trade that got rid of Clevenger, but they didn't get any top 100 prospects, which makes sense, unfortunately. They went for quantity over quality, you could say. But it's not like they netted a bad haul from San Diego with that trade. But they only have one top 100 player in third baseman Nolan Jones, who is the 45th prospect in all of baseball. And then we have shortstop Tyler Freeman, catcher Bo Naylor, outfielder George Valera, shortstop Gabriel Arias, who was acquired for Mike Clevenger, right-handed pitcher Daniel Espino, shortstop Brian Rocio, second baseman Aaron Bracco, right-handed pitcher Ethan Hankins, and right-handed pitcher Tristan McKenzie. So Nolan Jones is looking like the real deal in the minors. He definitely looks like he has room to develop and become their starting third baseman of the future. What does that mean for Jose Ramirez in the big leagues? Well, he's probably going to end up getting traded or just slotted to permanent DH. But right now, they're definitely happy with what they have. And I think they're just going to try to get Jones up sooner rather than later once he's ready. Other than that, Ethan Hankins, their ninth prospect, is a guy to watch. This farm system's very good at developing arms, as we've seen. They've had... I don't know if I want to credit Carlos Carrasco to them, but Corey Kluber, I will give Carrasco to him. Carlos Carrasco, he was acquired via trade, but still. Shane Bieber, of course, and even Mike Clevenger, Zach Plasek, and Aaron Savali, who's actually from Connecticut. So shout out to Aaron Savali from being for Connecticut. Hankins and even Tristan McKenzie both have looked very good in the minors. So there's definite room for improvement for both of them. I think they'll both be higher on this prospect list at some point. I didn't mention it for Chicago. Chicago's top 10 was built with 6 guys that they drafted, 2 international free agent signings, and 2 were acquired via trade. Of course, Kopech being one of them. And then for Cleveland, 6 of them were drafted, 3 of them were signed as international free agents, and 1 of them was acquired via trade. And that, of course, is going to be Gabriel Arias. Now we get to Detroit. So Detroit has one of the better farm systems in baseball, which is why the AL Central scares me. You have a lot of strong farm systems. So Detroit, of course, their number 1 prospect is the number 7 prospect in all of baseball, and third baseman, first baseman Spencer Torkelson. They have their number 2 prospect is the number 8 in all of baseball with right-handed pitcher Casey Miz. And then they have the number 25 prospect in right-handed pitcher Matt Manning. They have the 31st prospect in outfielder Riley Greene. And they have the 49th prospect in left-hander Tarek Skubal. And then they have third baseman, shortstop Isaac Paredes, outfielder Daz Cameron, catcher Dylan Dingler, left-handed pitcher Joey Wentz, and right-handed pitcher Alex Fado. So they have 5 top 100 prospects, which is always impressive, but it makes sense for a rebuilding team. And they've drafted 7 of these players and traded for 3 of them. So I did do a little more research on Detroit because the guy who recommended this video suggested this video is a big Detroit fan. So, of course, we all know who Torkelson is. He was the first overall pick in the 2020 MLB draft, and he's just known for his power. He does have good, respectable defense, not amazing, but he is definitely known for his power. So Torkelson's a guy who they want at third base. They want to try him out at third base, but he's probably more going to be a first baseman, which is fine. Miguel Cabrera is getting old, as we know. Torkelson's probably a couple years away from debuting, but still inspiring. Casey Miz, we saw him debut earlier this season, 2020. He got beat up a little bit, but again, he's a young guy. He's probably going to slot in as an ace in the future, which is always exciting. Matt Manning's probably going to slot in right beside him as the number 2. Matt Manning has a lot of potential as well, and he looked really good in the minors heading up to this, as did Tarek Skubal. So these guys both looked very good in the minors. Skubal's actually a guy who dealt with Tommy John before he was drafted, and he's really developed really well. He was definitely a mid-round steal for them. He was either an 8th or a 9th rounder. So it's always good for a team to hit on an 8th or a 9th rounder. If they can become a solid major league contributor, you get a win. But see, Detroit definitely invested in their pitching. Speaking of pitchers here, we have Joey Wentz, who was acquired via trade from Atlanta. So, again, it's a good player to have. Wentz has been having a little bit of problems, as did Alex Fado. He definitely doesn't look like a guy that's going to be a number 2 starter like he was originally projected to be. But you can't hit on everybody, and even if these guys come up and become relievers long term, it's fine. Arms, if you can develop one of them into a solid setup man, you're set. Riley Greene's young still, and he's got a lot of talent as well. Riley Greene just has to grow a little bit more as a player in the outfield. Daz Cameron is a very concerning player right now. He's so streaky, and he's not the young kid he was when he was drafted by Houston and acquired in the Verlander trade. He's still good, don't get me wrong, but Daz Cameron definitely has to grow a bit more as a player. He really has been struggling lately, and if you look at even fantasy ranks for dynasty leagues, Daz Cameron's been on the free fall recently because he wasn't looking good last year. He looked decent, and then he just fell off a cliff. had a long season. So Detroit might try to get rid of Daz Cameron at some point soon. Paredes on their sixth prospect here. He looks good. The problem with him is he looks like he's going to be building into a third baseman rather than a shortstop, which would kind of give Detroit a interesting predicament with Torkelson, who they want to become a third baseman, and Paredes, who looks like he's going to be a third baseman. They might kind of be stuck with two third basemen. The positive, though, is they're in the AL, so of course they have the ability to DH one of them. And again, I think Torkelson will be a first baseman all said and done. And then last but not least, they do have Dylan Dingler, who also kind of looks like he's going to develop into a potential, corner infielder, probably third base. But he is a catcher at the moment. He has a great arm, so there's that going for him. But the future always changes, and some of the times these guys end up changing positions. We've seen it a lot with catcher prospects. Usually it takes one injury, and it's usually a head injury that just messes them up. We've seen it before with Tommy Joseph, for example, for the Giants/Phillies. All it takes is that one concussion, and these guys end up just going to the field because they don't feel comfortable going down anymore, or a bad knee injury. But that's Detroit, definitely one of the better farm systems in the league. So now we get to Kansas City, and Kansas City doesn't have the eye-popping names, but they do have some big players. They have 4 top 100 prospects, and they have the number 11 prospect in shortstop Bobby Witt Jr. They have the 32nd prospect in left-hander Asa Lacy. They have the 61st prospect in right-hand pitcher Brady Singer, and they have the 63rd prospect in left-handed pitcher Daniel Lynch, and then they have right-handed pitcher Jackson Kowar, outfielder Eric Pena, left-hander Chris Bubic, shortstop Nick Lofton, and a pair of outfielders in Kyle Isbell and Khalil Lee. So again, Bobby Witt Jr. was a top pick last year, I believe it was 2019. So he's good. We've seen Brady Singer in the majors this year, and he's been decent. He hasn't been electric 100%, but it's a weird season, so a lot of teams are calling up prospects. Brady Singer looks like he's going to be a good player in the majors. He might not be the number one player. He might not be a number one pitcher. But again, I hate to say, oh, this guy's a bust when he's just made a couple appearances in the majors. Other than that, I mean, Eric Pena was actually one of the bigger signings in international pools. A couple last year, I believe it was 2019, if not 2018. And he's looking pretty good for Kansas City. They gave him a lot of money, so they're definitely hoping for him to develop. They have 9 of these guys they drafted, and the one that they didn't was Eric Pena, who they signed as an international free agent. So Kansas City really has been making a lot of big-name trades because they really don't have a lot of big-name players to be trading. But this team, I mean, what's crazy about this team is they're kind of an afterthought even 5 years down the road in this division. 5 years down the road, they're probably going to be third or fourth if I had to guess, because they'll probably be ahead of Cleveland, but Minnesota's the wild card. Detroit and Chicago have really good farms. Now we get to Minnesota, and Minnesota also has 4 top 100 prospects, but theirs are a little more spread out. As we saw with Kansas City, they're all in the top 63. Minnesota, not so much. They have shortstop Royce Lewis, who is actually the 10th prospect in baseball, the 33rd prospect in outfielder, first baseman Alex Killaroff. They have the 87th prospect in outfielder Trevor Lonach, and they have the 93rd prospect in right-hander Jordan Balazovic. And then they have righty Joan Duran, catcher Ryan Jeffers, shortstop Keone Cavaco, first baseman Aaron Sabato, shortstop Wander Javier, and right-handed pitcher Blaine Elo. It's an interesting farm system. It feels like Royce Lewis and Killaroff have been in the system forever, but that's because, the Twins are my AL team that I follow a bit more than others, so I remember these guys getting drafted, and I'm pretty sure Royce Lewis was drafted the same year as Bregman or Correa for Houston, and he's a solid player. Killaroff definitely has good power. Lewis is kind of the opposite. He has good speed. So Minnesota looks like they have a potential good duo right there for a while. And they really need some pitching help in the majors even. And they don't have it in the minors. So Minnesota's going to be an offensive heavy team for the next few years, which is both good and bad. It's good because they need help. They need cheap, controllable help for the future. But it's bad because they're a small market team, so a lot of these players might end up walking after their rookie contracts are up. Now we get, they did have 8 of these guys were drafted. 1 was signed as an international free agent, and 1 was acquired via trade. But now we get to the NL Central, and we'll start off with the Chicago Cubbies. And the Cubs only have 2 top 100 prospects in the 72nd prospect in baseball, left-hander Braylon Marquez, and the 82nd in outfielder Brennan Davis. Then they have catcher Miguel Amaya, shortstop Ed Howard, outfielder Cole Rodier, a trio of righties in Adbert Alzolay, right-hander Cole Franklin, right-hander Ryan Jensen, second baseman Chase Trump, and lefty Burl Caraway. Now, how they built this team, they drafted 7 of them, and they signed 3 of them as international free agents. So, the Cubs are in an interesting position right now. I didn't expect them to be as good as they are in, the majors at this moment. I didn't see them as a true contender at this time, but they actually are contending, so they definitely made me eat my words there. They're looking good, and the problem with them is a lot of these guys are going to be a few years away from debuting, and they kind of need the help this year or next year. But we'll see what happens. Again, Chris Bryant's probably still on the trading block just because I don't think they want to keep eating that contract if he keeps getting hurt. So the problem with that is they really don't have a guy who's going to step up and replace him in the minors, at least. So they are probably going to try to trade Bryant for a third baseman unless he stays healthy for the rest of the season and produces at a high rate. But we'll see. We shall go to the Cincinnati Reds now. And the Reds have they have a pair of pitchers at the top of their farm system, but then they really don't have a lot of pitchers in the system. They have 3 top 100 players, with the 51st being left-hander Nick Lodolo, the 54th being right-hander Hunter Greene, and the 88th being outfielder Austin Hendrick. Then they have catcher Tyler Stevenson, third baseman Jonathan India, shortstop Jose Garcia, outfielder Michael Sanii, second baseman, third baseman Tyler Callahan, third baseman Reese Hins, and right-handed pitcher Tony Santillan. So they have a lot of guys who are third baseman here. Jonathan India is a guy who seems to have been in this farm system for who knows how long. Same with Tyler Stevenson. Stevenson did appear in 1 major league game this year, and he did good, but he hasn't really played other than that. So he's a good catching prospect. But of course, we don't want to talk about the lower guys. We want to talk more about the higher guys. And Lodolo, I don't know too much about, but Hunter Greene is hurt this year. I think he was going to be in the majors, but he did suffer an injury, and he's not playing. So, originally when I saw he was listed as out, I thought, maybe he opted out of the season, but he is dealing with an injury. It's too bad. He definitely has potential, but so the thing about Cincinnati here is they did draft 9 of these guys and signed 1 of them as an international free agent. So it goes to show you that some of these teams really go out there and draft very well, because a guy's not going to stay in your farm system and be a top 10 prospect after 10 years. So you're getting some of these guys in the second round, third round, competitive rounds. Always cool. Then we get to Milwaukee, and Milwaukee has a weaker farm system, again, in part because of the Christian Yelich trade, and they just really haven't been hitting a lot. They've been a mediocre team for the past half decade, so they aren't getting the top picks, but they're not competing in the major league level. So they only have 1 top 100 prospect, and that's going to be the 65th prospect in outfielder Garrett Mitchell. And then they have shortstop second baseman Bryce Turang, left-hander Ethan Small, catcher Mario Feliciano, outfielder Tristan Lutz, a pair of lefties in Aaron Ashby and Antone Kelly, a shortstop in Eduardo Garcia, another outfielder in Hedbert Perez, and a righty in Drew Rasmussen. So, again, it's definitely a weaker farm system, and the problem with that is they aren't producing at the major league level like you'd hope they were with this farm system. but they're still in a decent position. I mean, you have Christian Yelich. He's going to be a leader for a while. He seems to have snapped out of the funk that he had to start the season. But again, it's not a strong farm system. I mean, they do have diversity in there. You got a pair of middle infielders. You got some outfielders. You got some pitching. You got a catcher. But it's just, it's no names really jump out at you after Garrett Mitchell. And in this farm system, they drafted 8 of these guys and signed 2 of them as international free agents. Now we get to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And Pittsburgh, their farm system's not as good as you would expect. And part of it is because of that horrible Chris Archer trade 2 years back. They completely got fleeced by Tampa. Don't you worry, that'll be a trade breakdown that I'm very excited to do. So they only have 3 top 100 prospects, but 2 of them are pretty good. It's the 39th in shortstop second baseman Nick Gonzalez, the 44th in third baseman Ke'Bryan Hayes, and the 68th in shortstop Oneil Cruz, as well as right-hander Quinn Priester, shortstop Leover Peguero, outfielder Travis Swaggerty, a pair of righties in Brennan Malone and Carmen. How do you pronounce that? Modozinski? And a pair of outfielders in Sammy Ciani and Jared Oliva. This farm system definitely needs some help, and they're going to get it because it looks like they're in line to get the top pick in 2021, which they definitely need. Just imagine if this team still had Shane Baz in the farm system, and if it had just graduated Tyler Glasnow, and even Austin Meadows. Like, come on. And what doesn't help them is the fact that, one of their top prospects for a few years is currently shelved after needing Tommy John. So it's just the team Pittsburgh's in a lot of problems right now. They're not in a good position, but it does look like help is on the way, at least in the infield. And if you can have a Gold Glove defense behind you, you're more likely to be able to get some of those pitchers to come via free agency, and your pitching prospects are going to feel more comfortable. So that's good. I mean, they do have a lot of help in the offensive in their farm system, but the pitching isn't really there. And they just need help everywhere up there in Pittsburgh, excluding maybe first base. Josh Bell's good. He's having a bad season this year, but now they drafted 7 of these guys and actually acquired 3 of them via trade, so they're not really making moves in the international free agency pool for big-name players. Last but not least, we have the St. Louis Cardinals. And St. Louis, again, they actually have a decent farm system despite the fact that they're still competitive, which is always good. They have 3 top 100 prospects with the 18th overall outfielder Dylan Carlson, the 50th overall and third baseman Nolan Gorman, and the 60th overall and left-hander Matthew Liberatore. Then they have catcher Ivan Herrera, left-hander Zach Thompson, third baseman Jordan Walker, shortstop / right-handed pitcher Mason Wynn, third baseman Elihuris Montero, outfielder John Torres, and righty Tink Hence. In my opinion, the best name in all of baseball right now, Tink Hence. What a cool name. I was a little surprised when I saw a player was a shortstop and a righty. Normally, if they're a dual position like that, if they're a pitcher and a position player, they're going to be like a DH or something like that, or maybe an outfielder like we see with Michael Lorenzen. But it's interesting. I was watching some footage on him. Interesting guy. Yeah, you got a lot of third basemen in your farm system, and you really can't have enough third basemen. It's always good because usually you can slip a third baseman over to the other side of the diamond, put him at first. And it looks like the NL might implement the DH starting in 2021 permanently, which is a hope as a Phillies fan for me. And the Cardinals would be in a good position with that too. We'll see. Now, Dylan Carlson's obviously the big name in this farm system. He's probably going to graduate from his, prospect status very soon. Nolan Gorman's looking very good as well in the farm system. And then they just acquired Matthew Liberatore in a trade from the Rays for Jose Martinez, I'm pretty sure it was, and they actually ended up trading Martinez at the trade deadline. So that trade's already a win for St. Louis. But that is the farm systems for the AL and NL Central. Again, I went into more detail about Detroit. Shout out to our subscriber who recommended this video. And other than that, The AL Central has a very strong farm systems. Hold Cleveland, but Cleveland still has Nolan Jones. So Detroit's definitely a pitching heavy farm system, but it's likely that you have at least 3 starting pitchers in that farm system, at least, possibly 4. So it's always good. Of course, Chicago's about to lose a lot of those guys from prospect status, which is good and bad for them. Nick Madrigal is probably going to remain a prospect because he got hurt, but Madrigal, I love that guy as a player. Cleveland, of course, watch their young pitching on the bottom there, Ethan Hankins and Tristan McKenzie, and they do have a good infield in the farm system as well. And then you get a lot of teams that are interesting in the NL Central, specifically St. Louis. It's always good for them that they have a couple third basemen that seem to be capable. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, I apologize for this having to be a 3-part series, but unfortunately, it just wasn't plausible for me to do this in a 2-part series. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Definitely check in tomorrow to check out our AL and NL West video. And other than that, you can definitely check out the AL and NL East prospect video if you haven't seen it. It's up. Enjoy the rest of your day.